Hey everyone, welcome to the 42nd AutoHotkey webinar. I'm Joe Glines here in Dallas, Texas.
Yeah, and I'm Jackie here from Copenhagen, Denmark.
This is our, we call them, still call them webinars, but we're more like kind of, let's work on a problem together kind of thing, unless we come up with a new topic or something. And let's see here. So I think almost everyone here I recognize, I've seen before, just about everybody. So you guys know you all start off muted. If you have a question, either use the chat or you can unmute yourself. It's just if everyone is unmuted at the same time, it quickly becomes mayhem. So that's our next thing here. There's 36 people registered, and a lot of people watch these later. And if you have questions or have ideas for future topics, feel free to email us, and we'll see if they make sense as a whole, right? For something that's going to be, one, relevant enough for people, and two, just if it's something that we can cram into really a 1 hour, 40 minutes worth of coding, because trying to solve an entire problem is one thing. Solving one little line on something, that's another, right? We can always do that, but trying to get too big of a topic can be problematic. So let's see here. I did have a script highlight. This one, and it's old. I'll show you here, and let me bring over Studio. What did I call? There we go. So I had found this one on the forum. While I'm thinking about it, I'll put this in the chat here, and it'll be in the email I send out. But I thought it was pretty cool. It's an easy way using a COM object. So let me uncomment the device manager, and I'm going to run it, and of course, up pops my device manager. So it's a great, easy way that you can access, virtually. I don't know if it's everything in the control panel, but it's probably pretty close to it. And of course, if we actually wanted to make these hotkeys, I could say actually, I think I already have Windows D, right? We'll do that for device manager, and it's interesting. I guess there's two ways to call the device manager. Let's do disk management as Windows. Well, Windows M is taken, right? Windows B. I don't know if that's something. I'm going to rerun this. Now when I hit Windows D, up comes device manager, and Windows, what did I say, M?
No, B.
No, B, thank you. Windows B brings up the disk management. So I just love this, and apparently I have a few hard drives. But that was the disk manager. So let me get those back out of here. So that was just assigning a hotkey to it, right? So it's that easy, right? So I thought this was a fun little script that was on the forum. It's pretty old, but sometimes there's things you just don't know about that are there. There's another one I thought about using, and what was it called? Something like shell hooks? No.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
That has even more, like the amount of information you can pull out of your computer, like the registration number, not registration number, license number, or something like that on the motherboard. Or
that doesn't sound like the shell hook, but that sounds more like I forgot. It's a weird shortened.
Yeah. It's like a query. Yeah. It's some sort of a query, right?
Yeah, exactly.
To an object. But maybe next time I'll try to grab that one. So that's just a fun one of we often do a lot of different stuff with AutoHotkey, and we forget there's some really cool, easy stuff that if you want a hotkey, like I have one for launching my network connections and for bringing up device manager. Those are two. And I think displays. I think I made apps V open my display panel, thing. And it's just handy having hotkeys for those things. And I think I used that that file I showed you as where I got the stuff from.
Yeah. It is great to have those small shortcuts. And often you may not need them now, but at some point you probably think, oh, nice to just be able to pull it up with a hotkey.
Well, that's what, like device manager, you realize when you are working on a computer and things are going wrong, it's really, really handy to have that for the device manager, right? You may not use it all the time, but boy, when you're using it a lot, generally speaking. And so having that to where I can just hit that button, it's really handy.
Yeah.
Of course, you could also create those with a couple of them and then create an executable and then just have it, on your computer, and it would run probably very fine on almost, I think, Windows 7, I'm sure, and 10 without any problems.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree, Dale. I think you guys know I got, I don't know, probably 100 or more hotkeys, and it can be very confusing if you don't have a pattern. That's why I use the apps key, which is between your right alt and right control on most keyboards. I use that for launching programs because it helps me. Oh, it's the app. It's an application, so I'm going to launch stuff. But you find patterns with stuff. It helps. All right. So the next one now, both Dimitri and Dale, I saw was here too, had written us. Dale, yours, just look. It's the apps key. Look it up. Right, you'll see. But it's you know what? While we're here, let me show you my main script so you can see how to use it in the code up at the top here. Those aren't them. Here we go. So apps key in B puts in my address. Apps key in A runs the Windows Spy, right? So I use combinations, and C launches the ACC viewer for me, right? But it's that apps key. It looks almost like a.
You actually have the device manager there in a different
do I?
Launch command.
Yeah. I've had that for
182.
Yeah, I've had that one for a really long time. It still works.
It's just a great way of putting to show that there's multiple ways to do the same thing.
Yeah. And I think if you went to the System32 directory, anything that ends in a .msc, you could probably launch the same way. You agree, Jack?
Yeah.
So anyway, back to what I was talking. So Dale, yours, and maybe we'll try to get to here in a bit, but Dale had a question about embedding emojis type things and having them available and easily you can hit them and dump them in and stuff. And that was where I had written back. I'm like, look, more often than not, my experience with that is it's how you have it stored or that you have a certain font available. But we can, if we have time, we'll get to that one, Dale. But Dimitri had a question, and in it he was initially, and this is where we want to start it as like an overall project, because he wrote and said, hey, I have a large file that I access, and I need to be able to search. Basically, what I remember the gist of it is I need to find if a specific value, a text value, is in that file, and what's the best way to do that. Hopefully with AutoHotkey, or and what's the best approach. Now, there are so many unknowns to that. That's what I started thinking through of okay, what are the things that before I would decide on a solution, do I need to know, right? Because there's so many things that actually affect what answer I would propose. So I brainstormed, and Jackie and I reviewed this stuff. When you say large, right? How large? Because I have an example, and it's weird because I thought I posted it to the forum, but I think the file was, it was 30 gigs, and it's a JSON, a JSON file. Thankfully, it's a really weird structure because each row in the JSON file was a self-contained JSON string. Otherwise, I couldn't have parsed it. But each row, had the beginning curly and ending brackets for that JSON string, and so. Maestri had helped me with it, and we were able to parse that entire 30 gigabyte file. And what we did on that one was we took it and we used the file object and kept track of where we were in it and read it and then stored it into a MySQL database because it was a 30 gigabyte file and it was just too big. We couldn't read the whole thing into memory because even though I have 32 gigs of RAM, I think, maybe I have more, I don't know. It would crash AutoHotkey. So that's one of the first questions is just when you say big, how big is it, right? And is the file going to be updated over time? Because also, do you want to, let's say the file is a gig, and let's say you have to read it 5 times a day. Well, do you want to really go back and reread that same file, the entire thing, right, every time? Or do you want to be able to go in and keep track of where you were in that file and just search from that endpoint, which is what's great about the file object. You can tell it a given point in the file to go to and not read the entire file, right? So if it really was that big of a file, that's probably the solution I would be working on. And then there's a question of like, well, is there a matter of just, do you care if the text value is in the file, or can it be in there multiple times, or does that matter? Do you care about how many occurrences it's in there? Do you care to know other information, like which line is it on, and which line is it on for every instance? Do you also care about the other information that is on that same line? Because in the file he had given me, there were other, I don't want to say products, that wasn't the right word. I can't think of the right parts that were listed. So these are something. And then how important is speed, right? Is it something that you really need to have lightning fast, or can it be, not necessarily live? Would you rather have a fuzzy search? And I don't think, because he was getting his data from a program was generating it, so I doubt he would want a fuzzy search. But it's something that you could, if a human's doing, entering, creating the file, you might prefer a fuzzy search over a straight up matching a very exact text file, or value. And then are you going to be running, is it something you're going to run and say, oh, I just need to know if this value is in that file? Or is it something you want to say, well, is this one? Well, what about this one? And what about this one? Right? Because each one of those, depending how you build your program, you might be reading that file in over and over, or especially if it's too large for memory, right? It becomes, again, where you might choose like a SQL database solution. Jackie, sorry, did you have any, you want to add to that, or just a thought process?
No, it's as we always already went over them, and you mentioned most of the things that I'd said as well. So I'd say most of these things are important to know which solution, how simple do we want to go, or because each time one of these is a yes or a no, you might need to change the solution, or you might be able to stay with a simpler one. So that's why they're nice questions to know about.
Yeah, and what we didn't add in here were other things of like, is it going to run on many different computers or different people, and do they have access? Like those are other things that I thought were outside, the specific thing around it's a large file. But there are definitely other things you would consider when you're actually writing your solution, right? Does everyone have access to the same file? Is the path to that file the same for whoever and everyone? Does the path of file change? Do you always have to select it? There's just a lot of things that you might want to know.
Yeah, I remember back in the day when I was writing and reading often from files that were in synchronized folders with Dropbox. And because the Dropbox service kept going in and checking the file, it was actually locking the file.
Really?
Short instance when it did that. Just it went in, checked if the file had been changed, and if it hadn't, it didn't upload it to Dropbox, and if it had, it did. And in that short amount of time, my program then wasn't able to actually access the file or append to the file or whatever. So I had quite a headache figuring out why some of the data wasn't actually being put into the file. And there was just a silent failure that I didn't know about.
Yeah, those are the painful ones, right? Yeah. And that's where I don't see Joe Winograd, but on our one talking about, what was the one with error codes or whatever, right? That he builds a lot of those in to verify everything along the way, right? And that when you're, that really helps in the long run, because it otherwise, as Jackie's saying, if something didn't actually tell you there's an error and you don't realize where it's happening, you're searching for your code for all the wrong places, right? Of like where something's going wrong. Yeah, very painful.
Yeah, it was quite simple, right? It was just a file append, and I'd never thought to actually check the error level after doing the file append, just because, hey, it's a file, I can append to it. But yeah, I've eventually figured it out.
Cool. Okay, so now let's start looking at some of the things. So I put together a few approaches, right? There's the simple using an in-string and using either like file read or what's the looping over the file. You can take that whole thing and shove it into an object. And actually, this was one. You know, let's go in order. Let's go in order. So here's actually some. Wait, I should say here. It's not that one. Look. So here are two, and this is again, we're using functions here, right? And all this is doing is turning it on and off. So if it has a 0 or a 1, it has a 1, it's going to execute it, and a 0, it's not going to do it, right? So now when I run this, it's going to do lines 4 through 8 because this 1 here, right? So it's going to go loop over that file. While it's looping over it, it's going to, each line, it's going to look for a given text value. If it's there, it's going to throw it up in a message box and tell you what row it was found on. So let me launch this. Oh, you know what? Let me move over this whole thing so we can see what's going on. And I noticed I don't actually know what's running right now, all these green H's. So now I'll relaunch it. So when I run it, so it found this EMP-001213 on line 203. And this was this is where also, like, I didn't know. And Dimitri, I don't know if you want to talk or add in the chat, like, did you want to know the other values? Like, I know you mentioned something about the volumes, which is the last value in the row, but this is where I wouldn't know, like, did you want to know just that, yes, it was found, that it was where it was found, what row it's found on?
Actually, do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. The use case is as following. It was a collision check. So I work with designing machines. And when you start designing, there is a possibility that you have made some mistake, that some of the components are in collision with each other. And actually, data is the analysis of if there are collisions. So the data is just telling this component with that component has a collision check of that volume. Now the actual problem with that was in the beginning there were doubles in the data, what is quite annoying because most of the time if you have the same components with the same volume, then that means that if you check the first one and you say, yeah, it's normal, it's just a mistake in the model, but it's okay. If you say that line is okay, then all the duplicates can also be okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one part. The other thing is some of the components, like for example bolts, have threads, and it's normal that they have a collision. So you could also start saying if you see that component with that volume, it's probably also okay. And that way you can reduce the analysis to a short list that you can check for the lines that are probably the errors. And that way you could remove the false positives.
Okay, so
but you want to be sure, so you could say just if you see the bolt with that volume, you can remove the line, or you could say I take the both components. I'm not sure which approach I should take, but to start I would take the whole line because that's the most secure way to do it.
And maybe I'm just losing something. When you're saying you could take are you saying take them both or bolt? I'm hearing bolt, but I don't understand what that means.
Both the parts. So check if there was a line with the both
okay.
the same parts with the same volume.
So these two things, is there any other combination of these two things somewhere else? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah. And correct me if I'm wrong, you wouldn't care about the volume, you just care that this one and this one is already somewhere in here.
No, I would also care about the volume because if you encounter one volume and you check it and it's okay, it's maybe okay, but another volume can be wrong because the position of the bolt and the other component can be different.
So this would have to be, you'd have to look for a row that had exactly all three values. That becomes a duplicate. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's cool. So still, that would be, here's part of the tricky part, and Jackie, see if you agree. Because of the row number on the far left, I assume that's a row number, right? And it's just an increment. You can't just easily say, well, compare every row in this thing, right? Because that's always going to be different, right? So the best thing to do is to parse out. That's what I would probably do, is parse out, use either a regular expression or something to drop this as you're reading it in, and just read in.
Correct.
Yeah, read this into your data. Actually, going out to here, read that into your data, and then depending on, that's where now that we understand it better, you still might, although the spacing I don't quite understand that. Maybe you still use a regular expression to get exactly that text, and then create an object with maybe a pipe delimiter with these three things, and shove that into the key. And then, because in an object, the key is always going to be unique, right? And so it would create a very easy way to dedupe a big list.
Maybe the fast thing would be just to remove all spaces.
Well, but then we wouldn't know where one begins and the other one starts.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, that. The other way, though, this is where Jackie or anyone else here is, because I know there's a sort in AutoHotkey, and we could use the sort with it has a dedupe function. I just don't know which one's going to be faster, or especially dealing with the big volume. If we had let's say 500,000 rows, if one way would be better than the other, or we just say, you know what, this is where Sequel would be amazing, right? It would be so easy.
Yeah, but I actually did a check this morning because you asked me how large is a file.
Yeah.
And I actually didn't know at all, so I just used the AutoHotkey to write me a file of 30,000 or 300,000 lines to just check what the size is. And it was actually quite small. I was a little bit surprised, but it's hard to estimate it if you don't test it.
Because text files,
15 megabytes or something like that.
Yeah.
And I tried to ask AutoHotkey to check if a value was in the file all the way in the bottom, and it's found it instantly. So I think I underestimated the power of a computer.
Yeah, but it's fine, right? Because what if it was a 1 gig file, right?
Yeah.
But this is where it really does become like, sadly, you got to test. There's just no quick and easy way. But does anyone else have any opinions on whether they would try to use use these three values and put that as a key in an object, and that's an easy way to dupe it, or to use the file, I'm sorry, not the file, the sort command to dedupe the rows after you drop off the first numbers. Or dumping in Sequel is another way we could do it. But is there any other solutions anyone wants to offer up that they would try?
Joe, what do you mean by using the sort command? That you would arrange all the lines alphabetically?
Well, the sort command, it will, you can tell it to remove duplicates.
Yeah.
It's not that you want to sort them. It's just that there is a dedupe functionality in the sort command.
Yeah, but actually, the list of the analysis is quite small for AutoHotkey. It's maybe 1,000 lines. To sort out the duplicates, you could easily just use a loop, and in that loop, I also see which lines that, let's say, it's unique code has, and then I know for that code those are the numbers, because then I can easily say if I see an error, I can know which lines the error is. And in my 3D program, I use Creo. I don't know if somebody knows it, but there you can use the line of the analysis to identify the components.
Yeah, I'm just getting back to, I'm taking your overall thing, not knowing how many lines it was. I understand now it's so small it doesn't matter, right? I'm just saying, what would be the solution if this was a gigabyte file?
Yeah, but wouldn't the sorting have problems to sort that much data if the data was large?
That's what I'm asking. That's what I'm asking everybody is, look, here are 4 different ways, I think 4, that I've outlined. Which ones would you use and why? Right? That's what I'm posing to everybody.
I'm not sure which method is the best one. I'm also looking a bit at what's the easiest. And of course, the loop is quite easy to attack, and you have already written code that could do most of it, Joe. Mm-hmm. The only thing I've seen from just looking at what you have on screen is that, yeah, spaces has been used to delimit, yeah, but everything has a set place. So right, you would always know that part 1 started at the 5th position and part 2 would start at the whatever 13th or 40th or whatever. Actually, that is continued throughout the file.
Yeah, but look, well, let's assume, because the one unfortunate part here is if this actually did go past 999, that would actually screw that up.
Yeah, you're of course right.
But anyway, yeah. Yeah, maybe it never does, and so it's not an issue. Or maybe if it actually does, this is over one more, right? And they're consistent.
The method I use is to check the first line, and then you can identify the positions.
Well, what I did was, here was one example, and I just wrote a regular expression to say, hey, if there's a digit, if the thing begins with a digit, right, digit and any number of digits and then a colon, take everything to the right of it, and that was an easy regular expression that I didn't have to worry about the rest. But I wasn't trying to parse out each piece of information. Now, granted, you could easily add more to this regular expression to do that, right? I shoved them all. So let's get past, so this one just went and said, yeah, it found it. This next one, this is where I did a regular expression. And this is what was, I basically ripped out the first thing. This is all of the data now losing the numbers. Then if I hit OK, then it shows you again, this is where I iterated back over them and said which ones had this in it. And it would go through and it'd find this is where, depending if you wanted to have multiple ones, right, it'd be easy to go through, iterate over every one and do them. So I borrowed that from this one, and let me go to it. So this one, and actually I got to see the date on it because it's pretty funny. I was telling Jackie, like, this is one of the ones when I worked at TI. So back in 2013, right, I had posted this question. I was parsing over 1 million rows of data, and was just curious if AutoHotkey could handle it. And Jackie was the first one to respond, saying, "Yeah, he it probably could." But yeah, I had posted the wrong form. So thank you, Mr. Spam Officer Jackie. I'm like, yeah, okay, you're right, okay. And then Hotkey it came up with a simple. This is his solution of parsing it. And then he actually gave me one for reading a text file and parsing. Of course, the regular expression is curtailed to my data, but did it. And it went from, mine took, I think, 30 seconds to run, but when I used Hotkey it was down to, I think I put it in here, down to 3 seconds. So in 3 seconds, I processed 107,000 rows, getting a list of all of the emails that matched, a given. Actually, I was looking at part numbers, and then it would return the email addresses after deduping them, right, for the part number. So it was awesome. I mean, it saved me so much time. It was a great, easy solution that allowed me to start doing stuff. See, at TI, I would do a query on the servers, and they just took forever, and it just drove me nuts. And so I would just extract like a whole database, put it on my computer, and run stuff from my computer and build my list that way. So anyway, those were the first couple. Actually, the first one in the shoving the object. Now another way. Now this is really cool. There's an ADO database stuff built into every Windows computer, right? So if you look at this by VXE, and let me put this in the chat too, in case anyone wants to grab it. Now I didn't quite solve it 100% because I was having some troubles with the file you gave me, Dimitri. But I worked around it for now just as a quick solution. The problem I was having was when I was reading in your file, I think it's not ASCII format, and maybe there's still a way to read in a Unicode file format, but I didn't see it. And what I couldn't do is I wanted to be able, I could read it in and look at it, but what I couldn't do is add like a while statement to my query selector. So when I changed, that's why a minute ago I was in here and this file, this is where I changed your beginning where it said, what was it? There was a number sign and then part 1, part 2, volume.
Yes.
I deleted that and just put in row so I knew what the header was. Now these, again, there's no parsing. I read you can tell it's a space limited file and use a, what was it called? Schema any file. And this is the one I tried creating. Oh, come on. Why? So I said it was fixed length, and then I told it here's how wide each column was, and it for whatever reason didn't work. I didn't spend a lot of time on it, but yeah, I thought that should have worked. And maybe it still would have. I should go back to that. Maybe I was still fighting the encoding at the time. That could have been it, because I didn't realize the encoding was wrong until I gave up on trying to do the fixed length. So maybe I should retry this now that I've removed the. I made an ANSI, file format. But when I made the file into this thing with just row, I could come in here and here's this is the ADO library or code that VXE wrote. This is just telling your computer like what driver's extension for the connection to the database. And I said select star from which file, which is in this case I called it file.txt, where row, and that was why I had to. I couldn't figure out the header row in that other version. I couldn't figure out what the name of the field was, the thing. So I said, let's just put it called row. And then anywhere in there, I could do a query, SQL query where it was like, and I said TRV 903. So now when I run this, it dumps it down here. So here were the rows that had a TRV 2903-71 in them, right? So it's really cool that you can load text files. You can even, like when in my other examples, I was joining files, using this to join multiple files together, merge them, dedupe and do some advanced query stuff on text files. And I didn't have to load them into a database and create a table and all this crap, right? I just did it straight from AutoHotkey with built-in stuff. If anyone's interested, there's some little nuances to some other stuff I can get into, but this was another solution that I was like, yeah, this could be, if the file was big, right, it could probably handle a lot of stuff. The last one, which I didn't actually work up a solution for, but the Sequel Lite, the one, and then John would, I linked, this is the webinar that Jean Lalonde here in the call webinar, he led for us and introed us to using AutoHotkey with Sequel Lite. And that has a lot of advantages, but some disadvantages as well. They're not bad ones, but it's just it takes more setup time, more thought process of what you're going to be doing, and especially how that file is growing, right? And how you're going to go back and read it in, and are you going to reread the entire file? But if you use the file object, you can keep track of where you were and only add the new data. That's probably how I would approach that. But again, it just depends on. Dimitri, can you answer that? When you run this like on a given day and then tomorrow you want to do it again, is it that same file or is it always going to be like whatever you said? I forget if you said 100,000 rows. Is it ever going to get crazy big? Are you always appending to it, or is it after a couple days it resets?
I would let it grow and see what AutoHotkey could take. Let's see. But I think it would be hard to let the file grow over 100,000 lines.
Okay, then it's not a problem. Right.
You
Yeah.
don't know how long they will use it, so.
Yeah. The biggest one to me was that I was worried about was, with anything, when you try to start reading a file, and if that file's too big, unless you're doing it smart, you're gonna run out of memory, right? But that doesn't sound like that's a concern, an issue with your file.
Yeah, it's too small.
Jackie, did you have any other thoughts on the overall process?
No, I had a few questions about Dimitri. It sounds as if this file is generated from a 3D drawing. So as long as they're working on that 3D file or model, that's when this file will have new data appended, right? It's not a file you'll be using for a year or something like that.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. So, and this task with going in and seeing if there's duplicates, is that something that you do on a daily basis, or how often do you need to do it?
You do it when you try to release the machine. So you first build a whole assembly with, I think it's maybe 2,000 components or 5,000 components. And then you at the end, you try to do it's a collision analysis to see if there are some strange things that you can see what you missed when designing the machine. But that's not something that you do on a daily base, more like on a monthly base.
Can you clarify something, Dimitri? Some of these we see there's just question marks here, right? Over in this where the volume should be. Is that a sign that something went wrong, or why is that missing?
I think it's a sign that the volume was very, very, very small.
Oh, okay.
So that he miscalculated something. Maybe two edges went very close to each other, and then the computer couldn't calculate it. So sometimes he has mistake. He has problems when two curves are very close to each other. That can cause an error in a 3D program.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah, I don't know. Well, it's one of those, and Jackie's right. Generally speaking, you can programmatically deal with a space delimited file, right? Of understanding how wide the things are, width delimited, I should be saying. However, if there's an option to change the output in your 3D program, maybe there's a way to say export tab delimited instead of this width delimited, because it's just so much easier to parse. When you have something consistent instead of having to look at the distance from where it is.
Yeah, but you, as you already, I think you showed a Redx version, right, Joe?
Yeah.
You could just go over this, and it would take it maybe 3 seconds, right? And to just shift all of these with delimited spaces and do it into a tab. And then your the query that you showed with the built-in 8.0 one, where you already have the column delimiter as a tab,
yeah,
would probably work much easier.
Yeah.
But again, if Dimitri, if you're only doing this once a month or something like that, the need for speed is probably not that great. It's of course nice that it doesn't use minutes on it, but if it takes 1 second or 3 seconds, probably doesn't matter to you. Am I right? And without a hotkey, and you don't even have it here, Joe, but when looping over, let's say 100,000 lines, using a command like set batch lines -1 would save you a minute just by doing that.
Yeah, it's in my default settings, but yeah.
Yeah, and I wasn't sure. But yeah, it very few or very small changes when parsing big files like that. But other than that, AutoHotkey can loop over 1 million rows in milliseconds. It wouldn't take it long. The things that takes long is doing the in-string check, seeing if stuff is actually a specific string is in the line. And as Joe was already getting at, using stuff like sort, if you're just removing true duplicates. But it sounded as if you weren't really removing all duplicates. There was something about some bolts that might have the same area or volume, and thereby not automatically needing to be removed. Did you say something about that?
No, I said there are two ways to look at the analysis. You could say this one of the parts, the M and P parts, for example, those are by parts. So I think that's maybe a possibility that is a bolt. And you could say a bolt has thread. And the other component, let's say that it's just a plate with also thread in it, and the bolt is inserted into the plate. Then the overlap volume is just the two threads that are colliding, but it's not really an error. It's just the 3D program that is missing some intelligence to recognize the thread. So in this analysis, you could say if the volume is that big, then it's probably just that error. So you could look at in two ways. You could say the combination of the bolt, the plate, and the volume is okay, or you could say the combination of the bolt and the volume is okay. At the second one, the advantage is that you could remove a lot of false positives, but I prefer to take it on the safe side and to say for each combination, you need to check it manually. And if one person has done it and it says it's okay, then it's good. But I think I would use the two methods. I would check the three values, so the part 1, part 2, and volume. And I would also check part 2 and volume, the bolt and the volume. And on that way, I could tell it to the user which analysis was used to remove the line or to say that the line is correct. Then you don't remove any data, and you let the user decide how in detail he will check the analysis.
Yeah,
but
maybe what
just an idea. I don't know if this would work good, so I would need to check if the analysis is correct and if there aren't any lines that are removed by error, because that would also not be quite good.
what I was thinking was it's possible you might even use AutoHotkey to process this and then dump it into, because you could easily dump it into like Excel and build filters at the top automatically also. You'd write it all once, right? And that way, every time it exports, it does all this, creates the file with the filters and even color codes or whatever, right? To make it very easy for people to spot what it is, the type of error or what was done, what was flagged and everything.
Actually, I use Excel a lot. At my work, I have another nice example. There on the 3D drawing, there was a table, and the table should be the same as a table in a Navision database. So what I do is I select the table in the drawing program. I press a hotkey, and he exports the table to a text file. He processes it. He goes to the Navision database and goes looking for the number there. And then he compares the two lists and makes an Excel sheet with the differences. And he filters out the lines that are the same. And then he says, yeah, for this part, there are, for example, two bolts added, or this part is revised, it's a newer version, and things like that. And it's quite helpful because a lot of the times we have an assembly. It's a lot of components together, and there needs to be a change in it. So somebody adds some bolts, and then he needs to know what has changed to verify what he needs to change in the Navision database, or he could just write it over, but that's maybe sometimes dangerous because maybe there are some changes that should not happen. And that way you have a quick comparison. My colleagues use it a lot. It's quite useful.
Nice. Always nice to have made something that other people use.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's not easy to teach people, certainly older people who use a program for over a lot of years. It's quite difficult to teach them new methods, but in time I managed to teach them a lot, and some people love it, and some people have difficulty to use it. For young people, it's easy.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we're all guilty to some point, right? We like what we know, but I think most people doing stuff on AutoHotkey were much more open to different approaches and trying stuff. I mean, Jackie and I talk a lot of time. We love AutoHotkey, but hey, if there's a better tool that will do something we're trying to do, fine. I don't care, right? I mean, it's nice having it in AutoHotkey because I can customize it with the way I want it. But someone was, where did I post that on the? I think I made a video showing that there's a clipboard manager built into Windows 10. Windows V will bring up your past items in your clipboard, and you can pin things there too. It's pretty cool. And they're like, hey, you should try this clip something, QE maybe. And I'm like, yeah, and they said it's far superior. I'm like, well, it depends. Like, all I want is to have access to my clipboard, and especially because I can go to any computer and do this, any Windows 10 computer. Like, that to me is like, that's the big jazzy thing. Like, wow, that's really cool, right? But it's we all have our ways of doing things. Cool. Was there any other questions on this? I think we good?
Actually, I have one question.
Sure.
Can you go back to the PowerPoint? Yeah, you were talking here about the Aldo way to use a database and the Sequel Lite 3. Is there a difference in speed, or are they more or less the same?
The Sequel Lite 3, and I don't know if either John or anyone wants to chime in on this, but Sequel Lite 3, you can create an actual store, a database file, right, and access it and do stuff with the ADO stuff. I'm not sure I can actually create a database and save that file and keep accessing it, right? That's the first thing that pops in my mind. And I think the Sequel Lite 3 has far more functionality than the ADO stuff. But you do need and John, correct me, it's you need the a certain DLL file on that computer. So when you're sharing it with other people, it just becomes a little more problematic, right? But it's Maestrieth, who does a lot of programming with me, he's written some classes around it, and it's lightning fast. When I asked him about this, he said that would be his solution, is to dump it into a Sequel Lite database, because he can pop it in there now. He has functions that he can easily create the database, open it, and then do any sort of query, merging, and whatever. And it's insanely fast, even with really, really large files.
Yeah, and with a good query string, you can. That is in essence, it's regex, right? It's just sped up because people have been optimizing it for so long. So yeah, it's fully indexed data when you put it in a database like Sequel Lite. So yeah, but again, it really does depend on your speed need. Do you need to go and learn a lot about Sequel Lite 3 to do what you need to do with this file? Or can you keep it more simple and use like an AutoHotkey object, or even simpler and just loop over the lines and parse them as you need? And from your data and from the need that you've mentioned, I think you can keep it very simple because you have no immediate speed need, none that AutoHotkey can't cover at least. So I don't think you need to make it more complex.
That was also my idea, and actually most of the times I prefer to not to use too much files and to keep it simple. But SQL Lite 3 is quite interesting to test with. Maybe I'll just try it out for learning a little bit, and maybe in future, if I once encounter a problem that I need a large database, it's quite interesting to have tested it out.
Yeah, I did the exact same thing back in the day, and I didn't really have a need for an SQL database either. But yeah, it's a good way of learning.
Once I started learning SQL, because I've worked with data for 20 years, right? But I hadn't touched SQL since junior college. It took me a little while, but once I started, and I wasn't even good at it, but I was still blowing away because I was using AutoHotkey to help do my SQL, right? I built a whole SQL writer for me, and doing there's ways you can join stuff and do subqueries, and it's so powerful. It's insane if you're working with data. It's awesome.
Okay.
And that's what Jean had said is, the thing is you got to know, and you have to know not only SQL, but you have to know the flavor like Sequel Lite SQL, because I used PL SQL. Is that what it was? Boy, it's been a while now. Which was different than Oracle's, or someone else's, the regular SQL, and Microsoft has Access, which is also different. The ADO was different. I mean, it's just, there's nuances. But yeah, it's free, right? It's like, hey, it's great.
It's actually kind of strange that sometimes large companies pay a lot of money to some programs with licenses and things like that, and you say even at my company they paid a company to adjust the settings of the 3D program and add some functionalities. And now I'm if they would give me time, I would make it amazingly better. And now I'm just building in my free time sometimes functionalities, and it's growing and evolving. It's fun.
So let me bring up a personal point. When I was at TI, I worked. I used to work in research, and my background is in statistics and analytics, and so I know SPSS, which is for doing statistics. And I had changed teams where I was then on the internet marketing team, and my boss, they actually had a license for SPSS, and it was time to renew. And my boss came to me and said, hey, do you want to renew that license? And I'm like, look, I don't use it that much. How much does it cost? And he said $15,000 for 1 year, right? 1 year. And I said, no, I can find another way to solve it. Python's free. I can do it. It takes me a little longer, but I can do that. He renewed it. I was the only person using it, and he still renewed it. And I'm like, I was so pissed. I'm like, freaking waste. Yeah, it's insane.
Yeah, I talked to you about it recently, Joe, with robotic process automation,
Oh, right.
where my company has kind of tipped their toes into some of that, and I wasn't putting down all their reasoning, and some of the reasoning is to have not have it in-house with an in-house coder or whatever. They simply have a company they can point at and say, it doesn't work, you didn't comment it right, you didn't document it correctly, and other different types of stuff, and they don't have the issue of losing people because they find another job and stuff like that. So I understand why they hired a company to do it, but the functionality that the company is building for us is so simple. Opening a program,
Right.
moving the mouse, clicking some buttons, and then closing the program. It's like,
well, let me add on to both of that for both you and for Dimitri. Is the other thing that grinds, just drives me nuts is here they spend a crap load of money to buy some other program that you don't even want. Yet when you say, hey, I'd like to spend a couple hours, this week or this month on doing this thing, they're like, no, we don't have the budget for that. Right? There's no time for that. We can't afford that. Right? And you're like, you just spent $100,000 doing, for something you gave me 2 weeks. I actually could have solved it in a better way. Right? It's
yeah. I think a lot of people have tried stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Well, Dimitri, you think that covers enough?
Yeah, certainly.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, you bet. And then Dale, I don't know if if you have your example handy, if we can at least talk through it and stuff. But Jackie and I had chatted some, and he was kind of in the same impression I was, that like, look, it depends on the type of programs you're trying to connect to and how you're storing your data. So it'd be really hard to come up with a total solution because it's going to depend every time the program you're trying to connect to. Dale?
Here I am.
There you go. Hey.
I was clicking my microphone instead of unmute.
Yeah, no worries.
When I was working with this, I learned you have to save your file as UTF-BOM, I think is the encoding.
Let me stop sharing. Can you share your screen? Is that cool? And I'm still going to be listening. I'll be right here.
Oh. Well, I don't really have. I didn't prepare the example that I had.
Fair enough.
Well, I could. What's this? Select camera. Oh, share. Share screen.
Hey, I gotta make a call. I'll be back in a minute.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Let me see what because on here. So this is the Skype for AutoHotkey, and there's different ways of saving the coding here. And I thought when I tried to set it to this and then save it, it was especially being the this is the autocorrect file that had like accents in it, like the word resume has accents on the E's, and it didn't like those. But I'm now not able to replicate the problem. I think I created like a new file. Oh, it did save it as that. So sometimes, people use different emoticons, and I was just looking to paste them into different places.
Yeah.
I guess it depends on the code page you're using.
Yeah, it does, and it depends on. It could even depend on the font that control is using. So if it isn't supported, you wouldn't be able to post in a Unicode sign that wasn't made in that font, just as an example. So I think UTF-8 has what, 64,000 different characters, and UTF-16 has, I don't even know, a lot more. Yeah, and if like American programs has for a long time run in ANSI,
Right.
where they didn't really have the need for special characters, and thereby there was no need for emojis either. So
Well,
we still
let's not forget, back in the day, memory was a big issue, right? And so they didn't want to do that because how much more memory that would take up.
I'd say the issue with it, the only issue I have with it, is that it's stuck around for so much longer
way too long.
after it being it no longer being a true issue.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Because like this file here shows like some of the symbols showing up, but other like graphics, I guess, are not showing up.
Yeah, and here you've opened it in Notepad, which doesn't really have that great of character support. And again, that's just a matter of it being Notepad.
Well, and here's the thing: after you've opened it in that, I don't think if you try to save it in something else, right? It's already lost. You've already lost the right values. Is that right, Jackie? Or are they still actually there?
It will most likely have changed it to the square, and if you save it, it will now be this square. It has totally lost it because that thing really wasn't there to be put in and displayed. So if you actually save it, you will overwrite what was originally there. And that's an issue with Notepad, but that's the general idea of Notepad. It should just reinforce that thing. That's why you can put in a binary file and open it with Notepad and just see strange things. Because if you try to do the same thing with ZA or Studio or whatever, Notepad++, it might give you an explanation. This is not a supported file, whatever. Whereas Notepad just tries to display the data, even if it's gibberish.
Well, here's it in Skype for AutoHotkey. It gives you a little different, it's not the graphic. And the encoding is the UTF-8 with BLM.
Yeah, but you've probably lost it somewhere along the way, whatever it was. Do we have something that's actually able to display what it is?
I'm saying like here's a graphic. It shows an alarm clock.
Yeah, and that's because let's say that specific font that you're using in ZA supports the alarm clock. It's an actual thing that it has. But if the font doesn't have a cheese, then the font can't display a cheese.
Right.
It's not like it's telling it what the pixels are. It's telling it, oh, cheese, that's this number. That it's the 48,000 character in the Unicode library. But if the people that made this font didn't actually take the time to create the 48,000 character in Unicode, because maybe this is an ANSI font, who knows? That is also just an issue.
Right.
And Jean actually chimed in here, but he failed to mention, poor Jean, he didn't mention, he led that amazing webinar on encoding, which I'm putting in the chat here. If you haven't seen it, watch it twice or three times, because it's one of those things I battled with for years at TI of understanding encoding and fonts and all this stuff. And he did a really great job, made some cool tools for peeking inside a file and seeing like understanding really what's going on. It helped me grasp the whole concept really well. And I've tried finding other sources to do this, and no one does a really good job explaining everything about it. Right? It's not that complicated of a topic, but in reality, when you start looking at it in the minutia, it is.
All right. Not a big deal. It's just
Sure.
sometimes you like to be able to pop something in. And
absolutely. Do they have the emoji for giving the finger yet? Because I'd like that one handy.
I'd say yeah.
Look at my mouse cursor.
Look at my mouse cursor.
In the chat room? It's on the link?
The chat room when it's on the link. Oh, sorry. We can't see that.
Oh.
No.
Oh, you don't see the link?
No, we don't see your other Zoom windows.
Yeah, things related to Zoom are not shown in the shared video feed. So if you do things with Zoom windows, you don't see it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah. And that's a cursor, but I'm pretty sure it actually also exists on, let's say, your iPhone keyboard in the emoji list.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it has been a thing for some time. I'd say I'm just looking at it now, and they actually have the middle finger. Yeah, it was added some time ago. Yeah. So yeah, Joe, people know that that's a need. You can even select it in different colors if you need. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Does this make sense to everyone? Did anyone else have any other questions or about any other topics or on this or what? I can't seem to find my chat again. Oh, there it went.
I had another topic I had emailed in if nobody else says anything, but if
You
somebody
did?
else. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't see it. Sorry.
Yeah, I had a little thing, a menu that pops up, and we were kind of talking about the hotkeys with the control panel. I use different flavors of a word called flux, and it pops up. Sometimes I use flux number 1, flux number 2, or just the word flux. But it doesn't select one of them. So I have to either press the number 1.
You want to have a default? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. You could use the up and down arrow keys, but you have to move your hands to move the up and down arrow keys.
How is that menu getting created there?
We could bring that up.
Yeah, I didn't see that one. Sorry, Dale.
Where am I? There it is. Right in this part here. So.
And the reason you need to select flux 1, 2, 3, only 3 or whatever from a menu is.
Well, I was trying to do hot strings, but then I was trying, is it FLX1, FLX2, and I was, because I was going to build more instead of trying to remember a whole bunch of hot strings, do a bigger menu.
Jackie, is your question all because even with the menu, you still have to know what flux 1, flux 2, and flux 3 are, right?
As soon as I just type the word flux, that menu pops up and lets me.
Right. But how do you know what? Or is that literally what you want? Is flux and then a number?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Flux number 1, flux number 2, or just the word flux.
Okay.
And that's just my business application. Could be any kind of word. And I didn't know if there was a way with the menu to select the default one. So I could just hit enter and go.
Yeah, I mean, on menus, you can have a default item. Right, Jackie?
Yeah, but it's not selected. Because it pops up.
Yeah, but you can tell it. You should be able to say select
Like that
You
bottom
can turn it
one,
on and off.
you know, it says default. But if I hit enter, it doesn't do anything.
No, it just closes the menu, but that's of course with you could probably do different types of things. You could also by AutoHotkey send the first arrow down just to have it select the first thing. But you can also, I believe, in menus you can have shortcut keys.
Yeah.
So if you added an underscored thing to Flux, you could use that to select one of them. And you could probably also set focus to the menu, which would probably give you the selection.
I guess it goes where the mouse is. Huh? Yeah.
It probably depends on which window was active when the menu came up. So whichever thing had input focus when the menu was created will receive whatever you select from the menu afterwards, because AutoHotkey will try to give the last thing that had input focus again.
Jonathan asked if you hold down the Alt button before the number, what happens?
Oh. I mean, the way it is now, I could just type either 1, 2, or 3. I don't even have to do an Alt, and it works, which is pretty good. But I just, like when I hit the down arrow key, like Flux number 1 is highlighted.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I just wish I could just
automatic.
set it that way, and once it's highlighted, you could hit enter, and it goes.
Right. I think that gets back to with what Jackie was saying. You could have it either, have it first select it. What did you say, Jackie? Activate it? Is that what it was? And then send the down arrow.
Oh, I did try that. I was trying to send it down here. But I think once you do show menu.
But you need to activate it first, I think.
I can see where you did something there. You have menu show, and then you have something, my menu, delete all. What's that? That's some weird thing.
I think that makes the menu go away after you select an item.
After you select an item, that makes the menu go away. So
why would you delete it? Why don't you just stop displaying
it? That's probably the thing, because you probably got an error when you tried to create it again. So now you delete it all and recreate it each time you run this. But yeah, it's just a matter of preference here in this case. But I'd say that the sleep and the send should give you what you want. But you have a down 3 there. Wouldn't a down 1 be enough?
392. Wow. Oh, I think this may be from changing the coding.
Yeah, probably. You have some weird stuff there.
Dimitri was asking if there's a way to display tooltips or images when you're hovering over the menu items. I know you can have icons in your menu items, right?
I can't remember specifically if you can have tooltips on menu items, but I've seen some extensive work on trying to display tooltips in all kinds of cases. So you may be able to do it, but that I don't know how many people have actually tried to do extensive work with menus. I've never really looked that much into menus myself.
I know Maestriath has built a message box that's based off of HTML. Well, I shouldn't say based off of, but it interacts with like HTML, And so you could easily build a GUI that actually have them and then have tooltips and everything right with the buttons, and it would react. And then you could do basically anything you want, I think.
Well,
Yeah,
trying to stay on the keyboard and not have to.
Oh, yeah, I know. I'm just answering it for what
Okay.
Dimitri had asked. After menu, so Jean, let's look at the chat here. After menu, my menu show, HK is waiting a section in the menu.
I think he means selection, probably.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, a selection in the menu. You will execute the remaining commands only after you selected an item in the menu.
Oh, so the menu is working kind of like a message box. It's actually holding up AutoHotkey as soon as it's shown.
Yeah.
So just as if you wouldn't be able to send an enter to a message box, you can't actually send it down.
Yeah.
Apparently.
Good call, Jean. Yeah. Unless you activated it from a whole different script, right? Which seems ridiculous to.
Yeah, because often you can't even use a set timer that wouldn't be allowed to run. That's actually, yeah. Okay, so you'd need some kind of programmatic way of setting a default item on a menu. And Dale, you've probably looked at the forums and stuff, right, to see if you could find something. So there wasn't
not
anything.
A big deal. I just thought I'd throw it out there for discussion.
Yeah, and it's also a good one. But yeah, you're probably halted there. John, have you tried doing anything like this?
You double. When the default uses the H key icon in the tray, so that's moving the mouse. So, well, it works with the numbers, so I can go with that.
Yeah, there probably isn't any easy solution around it, but someone has probably had the same issue and tried to solve it at some point. But yeah, it's probably an inherited issue with AutoHotkey in general. You can't use any kind of real workaround because, hey, if the AutoHotkey thread is halted and waiting, you can't really do anything there.
You know, what's that script? Lentilist? Is that what it is? Or you can start typing and it offers up things that match it, and then you can select from it.
Yeah, that's one of it. Yeah, it's using some kind of list view or something. I can't remember. Yeah.
And that one, I think you can arrow up and down and select. It automatically has you in there.
That's because it's just a normal GUI, right? So it's because it's a menu that Windows is. We're using the Windows API to create the menu, and because we're using that, AutoHotkey is built to wait for the menu to.
So you might check out Lentilist.
How do you L-E-N-T-A?
L-I-N-T. I'll put a link in the chat here. I Googled it and found it. It's pretty amazing, and it's very, very flexible. It's one of those things. Also, it does a lot, so it's a bit overwhelming to look at. But when I was with TI doing SQL stuff, you could have it start typing, and when after 4 characters, start auto suggesting what I'm trying to type. What I didn't like was it had to be an exact match, right? So if I mistyped a letter, it would kill whatever I'm doing. So you had to remember the first couple letters because otherwise it wouldn't offer anything. Having said that, it was really cool because you could easily have the text pop up, have it, you could arrow up and down. I think it even weighted on how often the most frequent one was used and put it to the top, maybe? Maybe I'm misremembering that. But it had a lot of functionality.
I'd say I did a single search on AutoHotkey one, and it popped up with an example of just using a GUI and a list box, and just coloring in the rows, and very simple. And so instead of using a menu, you would get around the issue with all the threads being stopped because it was a GUI. You won't have the exact same look as a message, but you can get close.
Jackie, you want to either give that link to him or use Drive and show an example of it?
Yeah, I can shortly share it here. I'll take that.
Dale, you want to stop? Well, all right. Yeah, thank you. Oh yeah, you're a co-host.
So I have that here now, right? So pretty simple version. I think it was posted up here. Nothing much to it. I could probably run it if I wanted to, but here he's using a hotkey to just choose a specific one of the options and then showing it. Choosing another option and then showing it. And down here, if the text list box is active, enter will submit the GUI, and if the color choice is red, message box red. If the color choice is green, sound beep. He's just showing you what will happen when you press enter. But yeah, down here you would just have on enter if choices, whatever choices you have, flux 1, flux 2,
right.
Then send flux 1, flux 2. That's about it.
You want to paste it and show it though? Run it?
Yeah.
It's easy, right? So.
Okay. Who knows? Whatever. So like this, and running it doesn't really do anything, but let's say I had a notepad here. Isn't really needed. I'll press F2. Gives me this one.
And
isn't really length controlled, but yeah, the green one is highlighted because I pressed F2. So the second thing is chosen, highlighted, and I can go up and down with the arrow keys if I want to. And if I enter here, none of these two were the one I chose, so it didn't do anything. If I press F2 again and I select like red, it will display a message box saying red. And I don't even know if you can hear if I select green, it will make the sound beep. I heard it. Don't know if you heard it, but that's the general idea here. And if you up here change this to, let's say, 100, sounds more like thing. And I press F2, then the size is more correct, right? It really depends on whatever. And as you can probably remove the height, I can't remember if it will auto or if it will just use some kind of default. But it uses 3 lines. But you can probably do it with rows if you wanted to, instead of height.
And Dale, you understand how easy it'd be to convert this to using your hot string to trigger it, right? Instead of having the F2 hotkey.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I think this would be a really cool, easy solution for you.
I'll give it a shot. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for finding that, Jackie. I didn't realize, it'd be different with a list view.
Can you paste the link in the chat room?
Yeah, sure.
That'll be $5.
Yeah. That'll be $5. Oh my God.
He just has to find the chat.
Yeah, exactly. I did have it open at some point, but there you go.
And Dimitri, I'm not sure what you meant when you say we should make a script to run a selected test as AHK. Oh, I don't know what that means.
Oh yeah, Geek Dude already made that. We should make a script to run a selected text as AHK. That's Geek Dude's quick code tester. Do you remember that one, Joe?
I do, yeah.
He actually did make quite a bit of work on that. So, and I see that Geek Dude, he was here, but he has left, sadly enough.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe I'll reach out to him. I know he's been busy because I saw he replied to one of the few posts I follow, his Chrome class, and he said he's been really busy. I'm sure with school.
Yeah, but he was here, interestingly enough.
Well, what I was going to say was if we can get him to be on board with next month, either we can get him to actually, because he said he would, we can get him to talk through his Chrome class, which would be great.
Oh, that would be great, yeah.
Would be just talking through the what was it called? You mentioned a second ago.
The quick code tester.
Yeah. Instead of us featuring it, since he's here often, maybe he can get on and him have a demo, because you're right, it's got a lot of cool functionality.
Yeah.
All right. Anyone else have anything they're trying to solve, work on? I guess not for that person.
No. Fair enough. It's fine.
Dimitri wants to demonstrate something. Let's see it, man.
Okay, can I have the screen?
Yeah, Jackie, stop.
I've released sharing. So
oh, did you? Okay. Dimitri, how long have you been using AutoHotkey?
I think it should be 7 years, I think.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
And are you did you have a background in programming?
No, not at all.
Just curious.
Actually, I just wanted to demonstrate a script, and it's actually a nice example of a context-sensitive menu. So depending on what program is open and what position you are, what you have selected, it gives you different options to run. For example, I saw Joe selecting a URL and copying and pasting it. That's a nice example. Are you seeing my Hacker Studio?
Yes.
Okay, I could demonstrate it there. For example, I could just select it, press one hotkey. Oh, ding. Should remember what I used. Yeah. And you say open URL and it opens. Yeah, kind of strange.
Lost it somehow, yeah.
Yeah, I lost it somehow, but it should open the website.
Yeah.
You get the ID.
Context sensitive stuff it's really, it's actually funny because I did it a fair amount, but it's still, I would forget so often to do it, and it is so helpful when you have examples. It's just hard for me to realize, like, wait a minute, every time I'm in here, I can do this and have it the same way in something else, right? Have it know. It really helps.
Yeah, for example, if I'm on a title bar, I can copy the win title or open the folder if he sees a path, or copy the file name that he finds. That's also quite handy. And actually, the origin of this script was actually to open project folders.
Mm-hmm.
So you can imagine my company has a lot of projects, and it's always a 5-digit number.
Yeah.
So if I just select anywhere a sentence with a 5-digit number in it, he gives me the option to open the project, and then I go directly to the project folder.
Have you seen Jean's QAP, Quick Access Pop-Up?
Yes.
Because that's another one of his interaction. One is the ability to have the shortcuts to the folders, but the fact that actually you can be in the, what are they called, the dialog box, the open and save dialog boxes, and detects that and automatically routes you to that folder, or file, whatever. It's so helpful.
Yeah. Another nice thing, I think it was Jack Dunning's. He has a nice script of, it's called Quick Links. And it actually copies a directory to a menu. And that's quite useful because you can just modify the directory, and then you have, I made an adaptation of it. It's a little bit different because it's a little bit more flexible and has fewer limitations. You can go, you can have as much levels as you want and things like that. And actually,
You're saying that gets built into a GUI? I got confused on what you're doing.
I'll display it here. This is the link directory, I call it, and he just copies the data from it, and then he makes shortcuts of it.
Sure. Yeah, that's also built into QAP, right, Jean? That you can have live folders that automatically update.
Yeah, this doesn't does it live, but you have to rerun it. But yeah, it has the same functionalities. And actually, one thing that I think not a lot of people know it, but you can make a very quick menu item that uses a function with parameters. So most people know how they can make a menu item that lets them run a label. Yeah?
Show it again. Sorry, I was answering a question with a label.
No, the most menus are made with to go to a label and then try and see what item was selected and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's way more advanced and easier if you use, actually it's 2 lines. First I'm not sure what he makes here, but it works. It's some kind of an object, and you say this function with this parameter will run when you press this menu item. Are you following?
Yeah. You're binding a specific option or a specific value to a function. So run2 has now the bound give parameter has been bound with the long file full path value. And so it's just a dynamically created menu.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Another example. Wait, I should check the settings. If I go to this directory, I'll open just a notepad, doesn't matter what. And I type, for example, v link. I select it and press my hotkey. He checks this directory. If he finds files with the name vlink, and if he finds them, he adds shortcuts to it. So if you have a file with a lot of different Yeah, for my kind of work, I have a lot of files with drawings, for example, and then you can easily select a string of the article number, and you press the hotkey, and you have a direct link to open the drawing.
Yeah.
And it's quite flexible. You can use it anywhere.
Cool.
Sounds like a nice tool.
Yeah, and you know, and I'm not knocking it, but it gets back to what's awesome is AutoHotkey can, you know, whatever your need is, right? You can either find or adapt something that tailors right to what your, you know, your need is.
Yeah. Another nice one is to copy the path of a file or a folder.
Yeah, but an example of that is if you hold down Shift and right-click anything,
Yeah.
you have the option to copy the path. I don't understand all of what's written there, but
Did you have Shift held down when you right-clicked?
I'm sorry, I pressed Control.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah.
Shift.
Alt pad copy, something like that. Bit further down. There.
Yeah, here. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I'm just guessing. I ain't actually able to read that, but yeah. So it's
That is quite good, Jackie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I made one where I hit Control Shift C, and when I'm in Explorer, it will copy that path to that file or files to my clipboard for me. Wrapped them in double quotes because that's generally how I need them. But yeah,
this one actually does that.
Oh, yeah. Cool. I didn't know it.
Yeah, depending on where you post it, of course.
A lot of times you invent a functionality that you find quite useful, and then later on you discover that it already existed.
I can do one worse.
Version they created. For example, at my company, I made some tweaks, and then I made a functionality, and they added the functionalities in the database on another way, but it's still not as good as. Yeah, it has some disadvantages to the AutoHotkey way to fix it. So, you see it a lot. Programs are evolving, and you get an idea, and other people get the same idea.
Well, I was going to say, I've even gone and solved like, oh, I should do this, and I'd write the program, do stuff, and then I go to save it, and because I'm really good at like structuring, you know, how my thought process, I go to save it, and I wrote the damn thing and solved it. I just forgot I had actually solved it, you know, and I'm like, son of a bitch, you know, if I just gone to save the file first, I would have realized that. But yeah, you get busy, you know, and forget you do stuff.
Actually,
yeah, but it fits quite well with the thing you said about the Windows key and V.
Yeah.
To show the Clipboard Manager that Windows already has, and all the things that Microsoft has added over the years. And I'd say one of the things that Microsoft is really good at is seeing what people use and copying it. So,
right, stealing.
Let's call it what it is. And they're doing it. And even today, we have a lot of Microsoft licenses and Office 365, right? And even in that, everything that people come up with, people managing Skype, all of that stuff, if they can't just create it because of copyright, they'll buy most of the stuff. And now with Teams, they're moving in on all these online chat things with Discord and Slack and whatever they're called. They're again, Microsoft is just copying what they did
Yeah.
and implementing it. So yeah, we're gonna, if you get a good enough idea, someone will actually try to move on it. Yeah.
Actually, Joe, I had another question for you. I think I once saw you you managing your AutoHotkey files. That is actually one of a problem that I'm kind of having. Um, I'm programming now for 6-7 years, and I've made a lot of things, and sometimes it's hard to remember what have I made and where in my file structure is it. And I think I once saw a video of you using a nice GUI to look for your files, to search in it.
I've done a couple. I generally use. Let me share my screen just because it's one of those that yeah, not that button. There we go. That it's one of those I wish Windows didn't kill, but this program, File Search X, it's not auto. Oh, I didn't share. Sorry. So File Search X, it's not even free, right? I paid for it, but it has the old like Windows XP search functionality, right? So I can tell it where to look. I can also tell it, you know, oh, I want to do by date, which all this is built into the new one, but it's just highly confusing. So I like this. I can search by size or type or whatever, right? It's got all the functionality you really wanted, but both Site and Studio have functionality that you can search across files within them to find files. And then the other one is just using, like, this is my quick access pop-up structure. And here I have it with, you know, I layer my stuff in what I'm doing. And because it's so easy to add a new item, it helps me keep organized, right? And I used to build all, because I have this whole other structure. Like, this is my own menu I had built, right, and written. But here's my SQL stuff that I even had wrote that, you know, automates writing SQL. But it took me so long to build them and they work. I just haven't brought them into QAP. It's nothing wrong with QAP. It just isn't worth the time. But I'm not sure if there's anything else that I had done searching across stuff. Was that? Do you think any of those were the answer, or?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe I think I maybe saw that one indeed. But over time, if your script is growing and also the libraries that you could collect are growing, also isn't I think now I use a lot of AutoHotkey Studio. I really love it. It's amazing, useful. But I think sometimes if the function is in the library, I think it doesn't find it. Is that possible?
It's possible. You could you know, ask Maestrieth to give him an example and he'll look into it. I know and that was the other thing I was going to say was, like, if we look at here's my structure, here's my AutoHotkey stuff. This is the work where here are things like projects I've worked on, and then there's the whole AutoHotkey functionality, which has a whole nother level of crap, right? But one is just make sure you think in a certain way and keep it structured, and that makes your searching so much easier. I can't remember what in the world I name stuff. I remember more of like how would I organize that, right? So that's how I do stuff. Otherwise, that tool, everything, I think, is that what it is for searching. It's a great search tool. It just doesn't help me because I don't remember the names of stuff. But my library used to be enormous, and it's still pretty big compared to a lot of people. But what I did was it was slowing down Studio a little, and so I created a folder no longer used, and I moved all these out here that it's rare that I use them. And I moved them, and that way I still have them, but they're not in there because, Studio at times it had so many, and it was indexing and reading them every time. And when I moved them, it really helped speed up Studio.
Okay.
But yeah, there's so much functionality, and even Maestria, who wrote the damn thing, can't remember all the functionality that's in it, right? It's yeah, there's I know Jackie and I have talked about it. We're like, even when you use it, you're not using a tenth of the features that are in there, right? And I try. I mean, I made 30 something videos on tutorials and stuff, but there's still so little nuances of other things you can do. It is really, really helpful.
Yeah,
I also restructured the menu because I found it a little bit confusing.
Agreed.
And
Yeah.
I've also added some icons to the menu because that makes it a little bit more visible. And also toolbar that actually is almost a copy of Skype, because I'm so used to Skype. So I made my Skype version of AutoHotkey Studios the best of two worlds.
Yeah, that's Maestria and I we don't talk about it anymore because it's a dead issue. But I keep begging him of like, the vast majority of people want a button. When they first start using it, to have nothing up there is so confusing. Of like, I don't understand they don't understand the Omni search and how to search for something and where it is, and they just like seeing buttons. And he's like, I don't think they're useful. So I'm like, okay. But I normally have my menu buttons. I noticed you had some, and I'm like, yeah, that looked a lot like what mine usually looks like, and I just haven't put them up recently. But yeah, I agree having some buttons. The other thing I was going to tell you was my right click. So I have like open folder, copy file path. I've adapted those into my context menu in Studio. So that's not a separate script, right? That's just I customize Studio. So I can copy the file to this path to my clipboard by just using my context menu, which I find really, really helpful because I do that a lot. Or I need to I want to navigate to that folder, right? And that's another one. That should be, to me, in the default context menu here.
But actually, could you make it flexible, that menu?
What do you mean by flexible?
Yeah, context sensitive.
It is context sensitive. If I'm clicking somewhere else, it'll have different options.
No, but for example, what I would find very useful in AutoHotkey Studio, if you are on a function, that you have the option to search the function.
To search the function.
It's a hotkey to go to the function.
Sure. Yeah. Alt F1. Right. You can jump to the function. Yeah.
But I think it would be useful to also put it in the menu.
Oh, you can. Yeah. You can add it.
Yeah, but absolutely. If you put it in the menu, it's always there, even if you didn't select a function.
Oh, I understand your point. Okay. No, it's not. It's not. Yeah, and I was going to say, I thought you were going to say, depending on the name of the file you're in, but it's the same concept. You want truly changing it based on very minutiae stuff. No, I don't think he has that built in.
On the other hand, I could make my own menu that's running over AutoHotkey Studio and copying the same functionalities. That's also a possibility.
Yeah.
It's actually limitless how you can use AutoHotkey.
It's amazingly powerful, right? Awesome.
Yeah.
Anybody else have anything?
I don't really have anything more. It's also becoming late here, so.
Yeah. I'm sure, Dimitri, you're in Germany. Is that right, Dimitri? You said?
No, I'm in Belgium.
Belgium. I'm sorry. Yeah. Cool. Well,
yeah.
Thank you, everyone. And
thanks for the chat.
Dale and Dimitri for submitting stuff, and John for hanging on. We'll see you guys all hopefully next month.
Yeah, absolutely. Bye.
Bye-bye.